I only ever seem to get sick on weekdays. I must have a weekend immune system. What's going on, YouTube? We're inside the Infinite Archive, inside Apocrypha, a free-to-play zone to go over our first of two Tuesday vendors. But just as a reminder, Golden Pursuits are live. They go for 34 days, so you have a bunch of time to get these items here. But you can see a whole bunch of different rewards and things that you can get, customizations, mounts, all sorts of good stuff. But that's not what this video is about, so let's jump into Filer Rules Inventory. We start with the Gilded Disc Lead, which actually just comes from a world boss. Now, normally you don't want to spend 5,000 archival fortunes for a world boss. I would say the only exception might be for a wandering boss, because sometimes those can be really finicky and annoying to find. But this one's a static one. It comes from the Left-Hander's Aegis Belt, which is the roll dodge PvP mythic. It's a bit divisive. Some people love it, some people hate it. Kind of in the middle. I think it's perfectly fine, but it's nothing that's like, oh yeah, go out and get this right away. It's just like, This next one's a bit goofier because it's actually the Torn Tapestry scrap, which you actually just pick up off the ground over here inside of Blackwood. It's right in the bottom part of the map, and you can just pick it up off the ground. So obviously, don't spend 5,000 archival fortunes. This save you a 2-minute walk. Next up is the Night Flame Shoulder, which you can see that we're modeling here. It's only on one shoulder, so just important to note. It's not a very expensive motif. Now, don't get confused. There is an opal version of this as well. This is the non-opal version, which is the one that's in store. So you'd be saving yourself about 100 to 150,000 gold. Definitely not worth it in the grand scheme of things, but some people love to buy these just because they have more archival fortunes than they do gold. I know some of you have over 1 million archival fortunes, so God bless. Canary Rouge treasure maps are interesting because a lot of times they can be pretty worthwhile to complete, but right now, because they're in the Infinite Archive market, they're worth this much. So it might actually be a decent time to go buy them off the ESO open market and do them because you're getting yourself some pretty decent set rolls, but overall, you're not going to want to buy them with your archival fortunes. That would be a horrible exchange. Next up is Companion Equipment Light Armor. This is one that it would be like, do I want to roll for a healer? And this is decent if you are looking to build a healer because light armor is probably the second most expensive armor trait in general. But I would say probably right now with the economy, lots of event boxes coming out, you probably could buy light armor in the healing trait if you really needed it. But it's up to you. It's not a decent roll if you want to throw 5,000 archival fortunes at it. Next up, we have a deck fragment, 7,000 archival fortunes. All it does is come from world bosses in High Isle and Aminos. You don't need to worry about that. Then we have the books, which we can't skip, or we get in terrible trouble, so I'm not skipping them. A Feast Among the Dead, Chapter 1. Personally, more of a Chapter 4 enjoyer myself. Gracius's journal. I don't think he needed to write down what he had to say. Bit of a goober, in my opinion. Then we have our affect scripts, which is just, it's so hard to really see these being worth the archival fortunes investment, because if you don't have them already, they actually cost even more archival fortunes, so these are all decent in their own way. Courage is cool, giving yourself courage. Shock damage, everybody loves shock damage. Wayfarer's Mastery, but it's not worth the archival fortune investment for any of these. Do your daily quests. You literally have to do daily quests right now anyway for the Golden Endeavor, which is why we talked about it first. So do that. Don't buy these. Then we have our Runebox Fragment. This comes from a public dungeon. You could just go out, get your first public dungeon, or just buy these. Probably worth like 20,000 gold. And then we have our Malographic Ichor, which comes from the Infinite Archive. Now, granted, this actually does give you access to a mount, but you do need 50 of these bad boys, so it's a big investment. But if you want to buy a mount and slowly save up by spending 15,000 archival fortunes, you're going to be slowly getting them as you do your dailies and such in the Infinite Archive. It's not a bad investment. Next up, we have our purchasable scripts that you can get inside the Scholarium inside of Ivea, which is outside of the plane of existence right over here. Now, the reason you want to talk to this guy is he sells you a static list of grimoires. So if you don't have those, fantastic to get. But you can also buy a rotational stock of scripts. And Veneration is one of the newer ones, I believe, but debuff reducing critical damage. Probably not super crazy, but it's probably only like, what, 10, 20,000 gold? It's probably worth it if you don't have it already. I always buy ones that I don't have naturally. Magic of Steel is also, same with Veneration, is some niche utilization. It's probably not one that a sweeping wide, swath of my audience, definitely needs to run out and go get. Dispel, I actually am a huge fan of Dispel. I think it's a pretty good one to have. Cavalier's Charge, love me some Cavalier's Charged. Haven't used it yet, but it looks cool. So nothing here jumps out at me. Maybe Dispel is probably the best one. Maybe you could make the argument for Cavalier's Charge, but let me know in the comments. What of these scripts is your favorite? And Class Mastery is static and is here every week. Next up, we have our Tel Var rotational vendor, which you guys can find here. And if you want more information on these vendors, check out our website in the description below. We break down these vendors as well as their rotational items. So the Tel Var merchant here has some interesting stuff for us. So we start with Far Striders. When you deal damage with a blink, charge, leap, teleport, or pull, you decrease the crit resistance of your enemy by 40% and increase your crit resistance by the equal amount for 10 seconds. That is pretty good for 1vxing, and if you build this in any sort of team composition type builds, being able to take 40% of people's crit resistance is a lot. That's a huge amount of crit resistance to be taken away. In fact, this might actually be one of the only items that I've ever seen. It's golded out. It's on a brand new set. It's 100k Tel Var, so it's a lot. But I look at it and I think to myself, this actually might be decently worth potentially 100k Tel Var if you don't, if you want to have access to it. It's definitely something that you still want to see if you can get probably and upgrade it from purple. But I'm just checking the market on it to see what the market says. And it looks like about 20 to 30,000 gold for a purple version of it, so probably not worth the 100k Tel Var. I thought maybe this would be the chance to actually recommend a 100k Tel Var set, but it is not, unfortunately. I think after the campaign rewards came out, a lot of people and have been farming BGs and stuff as well. Fortunately, not worth getting if you're trying to make a money investment, but if you have more Tel Var than gold, it could be decent. How I would rate this set right now, people have described it as cracked. I don't think it's a staple of any type of content, so I'll just give it a flat 9.0 and say it's fantastic. Next up is Sentry. Now, Sentry is another PvP set. Fun fact, these are all PvP sets because they all come from PvP in some way, shape, or form. You get stam, spell damage, and weapon damage, crit chance, and weapon and spell damage as a 5, and when you begin to crouch, you gain stealth detection for 10 seconds. This effect can be used and activated every 30 seconds. So you get 10 seconds, you get up to every 30 seconds. When you think about it, right, this set actually gives you 266 weapon and spell damage. That's a decent amount for a 5-piece without having to do anything special. And you're probably thinking to yourself, Jake, I get that stealth detection can be good, but when am I ever going to need that? You could use this on an Imperial City build where you hunt down stealthy hooligans and you explode them and steal their Tel Var. This is like a Tel Var thief build. If you've ever seen one in your life, you can make a Nightblade that just goes around and hunts other Nightblades essentially with this build. And you're still getting 266 weapon and spell damage for a 5-piece is not crazy, but when you begin to crouch, you gain stealth detection for 10 seconds. I mean, that's pretty good. And if you've ever been pulled out of stealth, how did they see me? This might be it. If you're using this as like some sort of Imperial City, stealthy espionage, steal people's Tel Var builds, I'd say it's like a 9.5. Like, that's a good set to use. It's super niche. Like, don't get me wrong. But we talk about these sets as what's their best way to use them. It's not like what's their worst way to use them. And obviously the worst way to use this set is to go be a tank in a trial, because it'd be like, I don't get any benefit from that. But if you wanted to build that way, this would be a pretty cracked build. Next up, we have biome-proof plating. Now, this is another interesting one because it comes from a delve boss, so that part is not super interesting. Just go get it from that delve boss. But very interesting mythic, though. A little bit divisive. Some people like it, some people hate it. We've had very divisive mythics in store today. When you're above 50% stamina, reduce your direct damage taken by 50% and lose 968 stamina whenever you take a direct damage attack up to once every 0.3 seconds, excuse me. So a little bit of a divisive set. Some people actually really like it. Some people hate it. I'm again in the middle. Sorry, I hate to be a middle rider here, a fence sitter, if you will. But I don't really play stamina, so I've never tested the set out. But that's what I would say about it. Stone Shank Frame is actually a really funny mythic because it's very simplistic where it comes from. It comes from blacksmithing nodes in Glenumbra. But when I googled this lead, just to remind myself what it was like. You can always tell when a lead might be worth purchasing when people say that they cannot, under any circumstances, get it to drop. And I always find that pretty comedic because it comes from the Oak and Soul Ring. So everybody's always farming the Oak and Soul Ring. And Glenumbra has a really high player population, so people do farm raw materials there. So this is actually a very competitive lead to get. So if you have 25k Tel Var, this could potentially save you a decent chunk of time. And 25k Tel Var, if you were to convert that to gold, is not a crazy amount of gold. It's probably only like what I would say maybe on console like 60 to 100,000 gold conservatively, somewhere in that range. Like if you said, hey Jake, would you want to spend 60 to 100,000 gold to save yourself 1 to 3 hours of grinding, I'd probably say yes please. What I would not buy though with that is Arteron treasure maps. No, thank you. Then we have our rings of these versions of these sets from above, so same concept with them. Then we have Heroism, Interrupt, Bleed Damage, and Leeching Thirst. Now, I have all of these, so it would actually be more expensive if you don't have these already. I think with how many quests there are right now, you probably are just going to have access to getting scripts all the time, and how you need to be doing, your scripts because... And by scripts, I mean your daily quest to get the scripts. By doing those, you're going to be building your golden endeavor. So I just don't think it's worth buying these. I mean, if any of these were good, I love Heroism. Being able to put Heroism on a scripting ability is so good. You're just able to get such a high return. You can now build your ultimate super quickly. You don't have to use Heroism pots, which used to cost an arm and a leg. I love Heroism, but I don't know if it's worth buying if you don't have it. So, I mean, you think about 10,000 to 20,000 Tel Var, because I think it's 20,000 if you don't have it unlocked already. That's a good chunk of gold, but would I pay, let's say 80,000 gold? Would I pay 80,000 gold for Heroism? I probably would if I needed it. But if you don't have the Tel Var and you had to go grind the Tel Var, you probably would say, well, I'm just going to go grind the normal daily quest because I got to do that anyway. And we round off with the Fragment of the Blind. Now, this one's interesting because it gives you access to the Forest Shock Wild Burn, which looks dope. Looks absolutely fantastic. But I will warn you, you have to do some really tedious things to get it. So this one, the Blind, comes from Bedland Vale. That's a pretty long and tedious boss fight to try to get to. But also, you're going to have to do Maul of Lorkoth, which is a pretty annoying one to do as well. And you're going to have to do Tempest Island, which is probably just more of a time sink. And then you're going to have to do some other hooligans. You're going to have to do some world bosses, some public dungeons, and some delves. So if you do want to get it, I think this is a decent time saver. So let's say, let's go back to our analogy, 25k Tel Var. Let's just say 75,000 gold worth on a good day. Would you spend 75,000 gold to save yourself from having to farm a dungeon? Some people would say yes. Some people would say no. Some people would say yes, but Jake, I don't have 25,000 Tel Var. And to those people, it's a different conversation. But I think it's a fair conversation to have, and this is the internal dialogue I have with myself, which is usually more productive when I'm speaking to myself out loud over a video game. So that's what I think. Fragment of the Blind, decent purchase, but it's definitely not essential by any means. But everyone, let me know what you guys think in the comments below, because as always, we're doing our 3 giveaway drawings. All you have to do to enter is leave a comment in the comments below. Every comment that's not deleted is entered equally. Second thing is just make sure you're subscribed. We are so close to 25,000 subscribers, and follow on Twitch and Twitter. And the third thing is look for a hidden word be flashed upon the screen. Last month, it was stockings. We'll see what it is for this month. So thank you guys so much again. Have a happy Tuesday. Do your golden endeavors, get your skill styles, and I'll catch you later. Bye, guys.
You better remember to like and subscribe to Jakeclips. Or you should. I might have to pluck your eyes if you don't. Or, better yet, I'll skip rope with your entrails. Do it now. Subscribe. Ta-ta. Off with you.